welcome to the Careers Combating Climate Change podcast. I'm your host this week, William Owen. I head up climate technology here at Boss. This week, it is my absolute pleasure to be joined by Michelle Lee of Clever Carbon. Michelle has spoken at COP27 and South by Southwest and is a United Nations content contributor. But enough from me. Michelle is here today to talk about her career combating climate change. So let's hear more from her. Michelle, can you give us a quick overview as to your career today and a little bit for further intro, please?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. When I look at my career, at first it seemed very alinear. So I started with a undergrad in biology and chemistry. I did a master of science and in cancer genetics. And then I went into medical device sort of market research and consulting. And then I went to do business school. So it was kind of like hopping around. But I would say that everything really started coming into place when I moved to San Francisco to do business school. And I ended up staying there and working in the tech sector, working at companies like Salesforce and DocuSign on the software sales side. And was super fun, learned so many skills, presentation skills, learning how to work with clients, understanding challenges. And also my role specifically was a sales engineer. So my job was to support salespeople in explaining technical concepts to customers and building proof of concepts and answering all sorts of technical questions around integrations and APIs and various things. And all of that sort of led up to what I do now today. I have a climate project called Clever Carbon, where we teach people about carbon footprint in a really hip and fun way, and we advocate for carbon literacy. And I think for most people, carbon footprint is a very technical subject and something that you kind of tend to shy away. But I think part of my, background in explaining these complex concepts to customers has really helped me bring that same ideas and thought set to how do we take something like carbon footprint and make it easy to understand and also make it fun to understand. So yeah, a little bit of like a fast forward through the many years of my career to date.
Fantastic. For context, Michelle and I actually met at Carbon Unbound, which was a big conference talking all things carbon in London a few weeks ago. Michelle was a moderator on the panel, and I hadn't heard of her before. So kind of while listening, I was doing some Googling and came across Clever Carbon, her website, and it explains, like she was saying, through some kind of fun graphics, such as kind of the carbon footprint of your coffee and oat milk versus cow milk and keep cup versus disposable cup. It's for anyone at home, definitely check it out. It's really cool. So you kind of mentioned carbon literacy there. Just for kind of my benefit and those watching, how would you kind of sum up carbon literacy?
Carbon literacy is really simple. It's understanding how carbon footprint impacts our lives and how our decisions impact the planet. So to give you a really simple example, every vegetarian meal that we have is 600 grams of CO2 emissions. A serving of chicken is 1,300 grams. A serving of beef is 7,700 grams. To me, that's having a level of carbon literacy and understanding the scale of the decisions that we make and the impact they have on our planet. Obviously, what is carbon footprint? That's also a part of carbon literacy, but all the things up to the average CO2 concentration in the atmosphere in 2022 was 418 parts per million. What does that mean? Why is it important? What happens when we surpass 450 parts per million? Why do we need to be at 350 parts per million or under? All of those things are carbon literacy related. And through the work at Clever Carbon, we try to break it down and make it really easy and sort of repetitive learning so people like over time understand, because it's not really one of those concepts where, oh, okay, like, yeah, now I know the definition of the Pythagorean theorem. It's not like that. It takes time.
That's still ingrained in me.
Yeah. So yeah, that's carbon literacy.
Fantastic. So obviously you kind of spoke about your career in tech in San Francisco. Kind of when did you make that pivot to carbon literacy, and what was it that kind of spurred you on to make that decision?
Yeah. funny story. So I was in London at the time. I was living there. I lived in London for about a year and a half, beginning in 2019. And during COVID, I was in London and I would, go on walks every day. And I live near Victoria Park. And every Monday, I'd walk through the park and it was just like a dumpster fire. There was garbage spilling out of the bins, which is what we call garbage cans in the UK. And, not only in the bins, but like along the canal and just, on the lawn. And I was just like, how are 7 billion people creating this garbage? And the single use, like, where does it go? How do we even have space on this planet? And at that moment, I just really knew that I had to do something to try and change this. I know that I'm just one person and it's very difficult, but I just felt like if I didn't do something, I wouldn't feel good. So I started my own learning journey. I was actually looking for, like, what is the measure of impact on the planet for things like single use items? And that's how I started learning about carbon footprint. And in the research that I did, like, this was 3 years ago. So all the content was very technical. Like, the websites looked like they were from like the 1990s and made in PowerPoint and using words like ISO and blah, blah, blah. And it's like very clear that it wasn't meant for consumers. And when the first time I saw a carbon label, like, everything just clicked into place for me. What is carbon footprint, the life cycle analysis of a product. And I was like, oh my God, this makes sense. And so I was like, I need to teach people about carbon footprint so that we can get more carbon labels and we can help people make more informed decisions. And so that's kind of how I pivoted, but Clever Carbon was a side project. So I worked on it in the evenings and on weekends for 6 months. And then there came a time when I was ready to move on to my next opportunity. I was actually applying for jobs and, I was like thinking that I would still probably work in something tech related. But the more I had this like free time, the more I found myself just spending it on Clever Carbon. And then I decided to give myself 6 months to focus on the project and see where that would take me. And I guess I just never looked back.
The story of lockdown, a hobby becoming something more. For me it was sourdough. For you, it's saving the planet. We're all playing our part.
Yes.
Fantastic. Um, so in terms of kind of carbon literacy, you've spoken about it on kind of a personal level and understanding it.
Mhm.
What can kind of be done at a larger level, like on a corporate level, within the space? What role can corporations play to help with carbon literacy?
I mean, I think first and foremost, we need carbon literate leaders, CEOs, C-suites, managers, policymakers, presidents. And, I think there's varying levels of carbon literacy among those individuals. But if I were to walk up to someone, a CEO or a policymaker and say, hey, like, do you know what the CO2 concentration was last month? um can they give me an intelligent answer like, it was probably, above 400, right? Or if they can tell me, oh yeah, it was 420 parts per million, I was tracking it, like, I'd be like floored. But I think it starts with leaders because they're making really important decisions about our future. We have a very short amount of time to turn things around, and we need our leaders to be educated on the climate science and, why we need to get below 350 and 300 parts per million. And they need to understand how their corporations can play a part. And to give you an example, a lot of companies, they write ESG reports, which is fantastic. They measure their carbon emissions, which is fantastic. And some even offset their emissions, which is great. But very few do what Microsoft is, aspiring to do, which is to offset all of their historical emissions. And that is the only way, like, if every single company removed historical emissions, that would be one way to get below 300 parts per million. But today we don't even have the technologies and the scale to do that. And so we need to fund these projects, and corporations can play a part in that. They can play a part in advocating. So, there's that side of the fence. But then I think corporations play this really important role in educating the masses. If you think about, where did you learn about DEI? Where did you learn about mental health? Corporations play this really important role where they can support employees with resources, with information, with money. And we need the same when it comes to climate and carbon literacy. Our corporations can be a central place where employees can learn about carbon footprint and learn more about climate and learn how they can reduce their impact. We can't wait around for governments to do that. And to be honest, I don't know if it would be that fun if governments took on that role. But if they, work with Clever Carbon, maybe that would be different. But yeah, I think, our corporates play such an important role in shaping some of this culture that they don't even realize. And this is like the one place to help us scale the education.
So do you think it's only a matter of time then where alongside my my pack of crisps or whatever it is, there'll be the nutritional value, and then on top there'll also be my carbon value on that kind of stuff? You think that's pending?
Oh, absolutely. The EU already has legislation in place, like coming up.
Oh wow.
They're going to put out policies. So for CPG companies, they will need to perform life cycle analysis and potentially share pieces of that information with consumers as well, and at least disclose the information at the very least.
Fair enough. So obviously you said kind of midway through, I think it was 2020 or 2021, you kind of COVID spurred you on to kind of push the project full time. What kind of challenges have you faced since moving it from a hobby to being kind of everything?
Yeah. Well, when I started Clever Carbon, that was in April of 2020. So that's when I started the idea. We launched in July. So we had a website, our carbon footprint quiz. And the challenge was people didn't talk about climate back then like they do today. It was not a popular topic. It wasn't in the news, especially with COVID sort of overshadowing everything. So getting people to actually pay attention and convincing them that there was like this really kind of fun and easy way to engage was definitely a challenge. And then also, like, from a personal perspective, like, how can I make this my life's work? How can I not go back to working a corporate job? How can I, find revenue streams by having education? And so with that, I kind of went back to my tech company roots, where company culture, employee attainment, and retention is like very, very important. And so I created a 1-hour workshop to teach employees about carbon footprint. So, I get hired by companies to come in and do like lunch and learns or keynote talks around carbon footprint. And I have a program that's like really fun and engaging. So that's been really helpful and was a key challenge. Like, how do I continue doing this and spending time on it? And then I think in general, companies still don't necessarily always have budget for these things. So that still continues to be a challenge
Yeah.
today. But I think more and more budgets are opening up.
And on I guess a more kind of personal level, how did you find that pivot? Salesforce is a huge company, DocuSign, everyone uses it every day in their life, in their corporate world. How did you find kind of going from being a sales engineer to suddenly being CEO and kind of having all of these responsibilities all of a sudden? How was that adaptation?
I mean, I love it. And it's not really how I looked at, like, from my perspective, it was like, well, now I don't have to have these marketing guidelines. Now I don't have to have these PR guidelines. Now I don't have to do things according to someone up top saying, like, this is what you have to do. I could do anything I wanted, which is so much fun. And I'm really just kind of trialing and testing different hypotheses that I have. And I do miss sort of having coworkers, being in an office and hanging out and working with clients. But I do work with clients today. And Clever Carbon has a global team of individuals who are working. Like, I think our team is at around 6 or 7 now. And so yeah, I mean, I love it.
Amazing. So aside from appearing on this podcast, what would you say your biggest achievements today in relation to fighting climate change?
Um, I think that one of the things that I'm really proud of is the fact that we've actually brought in a lot of interns and volunteers through Clever Carbon. I would say we've had over 30 people come through who have now had practical experience. Like they didn't have climate experience on their resume before. They do now. They've worked on various projects and, very proud of the work that they've done. And we continue to offer these opportunities. That's a win-win for both parties. So they get experience, we get content as well. And, it's not something that I really thought about ever before until I became, a leader of this project. I think, like, in a very practical and tangible way, something that I'm really proud of is the work that we've done with the National Basketball Association, the NBA.
Oh wow.
We are an official partner to them. They have a social impact arm called NBA Cares, and within NBA Cares, they also have specifically NBA Green. And so they use the Clever Carbon footprint quiz to engage their fans, and hopefully players as well, on carbon literacy. And obviously, the NBA platform is incredibly influential. And the fact that they were brave enough to be one of the first sports teams to bring carbon literacy to their fans, and that Clever Carbon was their partner, I'm just incredibly humbled by that.
That's fantastic. Um, so aside from kind of the carbon literacy side of things, what else are you doing in the kind of the climate change space at the moment?
Yeah. So I have another project called Women in Climate, and Women in Climate is a nonprofit, and our goal is to help women thrive in their climate journey, no matter if they're just getting started or if they're already veterans in the space. And core to our mission is to also help as many women get started on their climate journey as possible and having more people come together to take climate action. We're quite a global organization. We've got over 3,000 people in our Slack group. We've done over 60 events across London, North America, Europe. We've activated like probably over 15 cities in Europe. We've done Asia, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Doha, and we'll be doing a dinner at COP28 as well in Dubai. So that is something that actually takes up a lot of my time these days. So I kind of split my time between Clever Carbon and Women in Climate. And another project that I worked on this year was the Carbon Newbie Summit. So at New York Climate Week, I wanted to create an event for people who are new to the climate space, because I know from personal experience, it can be very intimidating to just kind of show up and not know the lingo. And, everyone's like, having conversations with each other and you don't know anyone.
It's a bit in at the deep end,
So,
isn't it?
right, the deep end. And sometimes you can't even get into the events because you're not working in climate. So we wanted to create a safe space for people who are new to climate to learn. And it was a half-day summit done in partnership with the Carbon Almanac and a company called Carbon Better. We curated essentially a half day of programming and covered everything from what is carbon footprint, how does it show up in my personal life, how does it show up in my professional life, with speakers from NASDAQ, MasterCard, Allbirds, the UN, the NBA. And it was just fantastic. I think like it was so fun. We had over 30 speakers and everyone showed up. It was crazy. Like, I don't know if you've organized an event before, but there's always like someone who, didn't catch the subway and or like wasn't able to show up, but like everyone showed up, and it was just like so much fun.
Fair enough. That's yeah, that sounds like a pretty stressful one to organize, though, especially like you said, especially in Manhattan. There's any
Yeah.
number of things that can go wrong.
There's a lot of things that can go wrong in Manhattan, especially during Climate Week and the UN General Assembly. Like the roads are blocked, there's like heads of states, and it's crazy, but everything went fine.
Jeez, that sounds intense. Um, so I guess kind of looking back kind of at the start of your career, if you could give yourself three key pieces of advice retrospectively, what would they be?
Um, I think I would tell myself to trust my instinct. And, I worked on Clever Carbon full time because I was going through a transition. It wasn't like I quit my job because I really want to work on climate and I've got this idea and I really want to pursue it. Like, I wish I had been a little bit more brave so that I had made the decision to work on Clever Carbon full time rather than, oh, I was looking for a job and then just ended up working on it full time. I wish I was like intentional about it, and trusting that I had a good idea. It's hard, right? Because I had never been an entrepreneur before and I had never done something like this. But it's okay to take time off of work. It does seem really scary, and obviously you have to be financially responsible and kind of like life responsible. But trust in yourself, especially if it's an idea that you're really passionate about. Um, I would say, networking is always the most important thing. And it's something that I, have pretty much embodied, but, you know, connecting with people on LinkedIn, having these like virtual coffees. I think I would have done a little bit more of that prior to jumping, with 2 feet into climate and having some of those connections up and running already. So definitely, having those networking conversations is really important, and just meeting people and sharing ideas. And then my third key piece of advice to myself, I would say, like, don't give up. There's always going to be highs and lows. And, part of being an entrepreneur is persevering, and definitely have had lows and definitely have had some highs, and it's part of the journey and it's normal. And now I know that, but before, when I first got started, that was all new to me.
Do you think when you were making that leap, do you think COVID making the whole world a bit weird and unrecognizable made that an easier decision compared to if it was normal?
I don't know. Potentially, because I was in my apartment for the most part during this transition. I think if the world was up and running and I didn't have a place to be at work and I was just in my apartment, that would have felt really weird. But everyone
Yeah,
was in the apartment, so I didn't really have that kind of FOMO. So yeah, I would say yeah, for sure.
yeah, fair enough. Um, so I think you've given some pretty good points there. But I mean, is there any other advice you would give to people that are looking to transition into a career in the space?
Yeah, I would say, um, this is said a lot, but every job is a climate job. And I think it's actually more important that we have people advocating for climate in traditional companies. So we're not in this echo chamber of companies who are already, focused on climate. I think it's especially important for people in these, normal companies, so to speak up about sustainability, about the product, about the culture, about everything operationally related, even things from like onboarding. Are companies giving out swag that people don't need, stuff we all get, like water bottles? Like, no one needs another water bottle, right? So I would say don't underestimate your the power and the influence that you have, even if you're not working on climate today. There's so many different ways that you can bring climate into your work. And if your company doesn't have a employee resource group around sustainability yet, get that going. Be the one to help spearhead. Find other people in your company who are interested, and start that within your organization. I think you know green teams are such a great way to spread the knowledge and make it fun.
Fantastic. Um, and so last question, what can we expect to see from you over the next 12 months?
Ooh, it's a big one.
Sorry,
Uh,
predicting the future, I'm not sure was on the job description of coming to chat to me today, but I'm throwing you in there.
yeah. Well, we're working on a couple campaigns at Clever Carbon that we will be releasing over the next couple of weeks, focused on energy literacy. You heard it here first. So I'm really excited about that. And also with the Carbon Newbie Summit, um, the content, everything was like under 20 minutes, and we had a lot of 5-minute presentations, like 5 minutes on what is methane, what is global warming potential, and what we want to do next year is package that up in a way where people can have this framework of spending 30 minutes each week on carbon literacy. And we'll give you the content, we'll give you some, questions to think over, and having people like commit to doing that together. So that's through the Carbon Newbie Summit, and that's something that I'm working on right now. I think that's one of the big things. And obviously, Climate Week, we're gonna do some great stuff there. COP29 as well. So I'll keep it to that for now.
Sounds like you've got a busy 12 months ahead of you. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. For those people that have kind of been captivated by carbon literacy and want to learn more, how do they find you?
Yeah, head over to our website, clevercarbon.io. We publish content very regularly also on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. So be sure to follow us there, and Carbon Newbie Summit as well, carbonnewbie.com. You'll find all of the content there. And also when we launch sort of that carbon literacy program next year, we'll have all the information on the website as well.
Fantastic. All right. Well, until next time, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.